I don't know about you, but I have plenty of things in my life to be worried about without adding any unnecessary worries and problems into the mix. And if there's one thing that I consistently see as someone who helps people break into the freelance copywriting space, it's that copywriters spend way too much time worrying about some really unnecessary things. And so in this episode, I want to walk you through the 10 things that I feel writers today are way too worried about, sort of help put your mind at ease around these things, explain why you don't need to worry about them, and show you what you should be focused on instead. If you'd like to knock a few items off your worrying agenda, don't go anywhere. The first thing that writers spend way too much time worried about is qualifications. Now, the reason people worry about their qualifications or their experience or their credentials is because that's how most jobs work. We're taught from a young age that you have to go through this very lengthy process in order to qualify for a higher paying job. You often have to go to college and get a 4-year degree. In a lot of the lucrative fields, there's pretty extensive education post grad. There's all sorts of licenses or credentials or things that you have to secure even beyond college. So the idea that you could just go out and start getting paid pretty significant amounts of money to do copywriting without any qualifications or without this laundry list of steps and experiences that you've gone through in order to qualify to ask for money, it just doesn't fit with this lens that we've been building since we were kids. And the reason you don't actually need to worry about your qualifications is because the vast majority of entrepreneurs struggle to communicate effectively through the written word. They can talk all day about their business. They can be very passionate. They can speak with clarity. They can give you a very compelling elevator pitch when they're using their, vocal words. But the moment you put a pen or keyboard in front of them and ask them to, communicate that same message through writing, everything just falls apart. It becomes really formal. It becomes very like fake business sounding. It just doesn't really make any sense. They forget all the key points of what they're trying to say. It's honestly a mess. They just need someone who's good at writing, someone who can sit down with them and take the message that they can communicate verbally and turn that into writing. That's it. That's the core deliverable of copywriting. It is not persuasion. It is not psychology. It's not all the things you hear all the gurus talk about all the time in order to sell you their courses. It's simply communication. It's written communication. If you can help people do that, you have a valuable service to offer to the marketplace, regardless of anything else you've done in your career. And on top of that, the actual true value of the writing that you're delivering for this entrepreneur is proportional to how much money they're making through their business. So when you first start out, you're going to be working with either new or struggling entrepreneurs who aren't making that much money and can't afford to pay that much to a copywriter to help them with their messaging. They can only afford you. But if you can come in and help them communicate clearly through writing, you're doing them a tremendous service that is going to substantially improve the value of their business. Now, because they're already struggling or new, the actual immediate value may be small. They're not going to become millionaires overnight just because you come in and help them communicate a bit more clearly. But you're going to increase the value of their business in the short term. And then you can use that experience to pitch the next entrepreneur who may be making a little more money from their business until, 5 years in, 10 years in, 20 years in, what's going to be allowing you to close 5-figure gigs left and right is not that you now have had time to get all these additional credentials and qualifications. It's simply going to be that you have more experience working with businesses that are making more money, and the things that you do for them are going to translate into higher immediate dollar amounts that will help you build trust and establish rapport in closing and selling to, more successful entrepreneurs, more successful businesses. The second thing that copywriters are way too worried about is setting up their business. Now, the reason that writers are worried about this is because they've heard they need an LLC or an S Corp or something like that. And the reason you don't need to be worried about it is because that's not true. The only thing that you need to do to begin running a freelance business is to begin charging people and collecting invoices. And then at the end of the year, you're going to file a Schedule C as a sole proprietor. And all that means is that you are going to attach your business income to your personal social security number. You don't have to register a business. You can simply file taxes that way. It works great. It's worked for me for 10 years. I've probably left a little bit of money on the table and overpaid in taxes because I didn't register an S Corp sooner. Some of the people I've been talking to recently have told me that anything over $80,000 a year, you leave a little bit of money on the table if you aren't using an S Corp. So once you have your first year making 80 Kelvin or more, go about filing an S Corp. But until then, don't worry about it. It's just one more thing that's going to be between you and making more money. Stop worrying about it. Think about it again after you've had your first 80K year as a freelance writer. The third thing that copywriters are way too worried about is how they're going to persuade people that copywriting is valuable and that they need copywriting for their business. And the reason that new copywriters are worried about this is because in many cases, they just discovered what copywriting is for the first time. And if they were to ask their parents or friends or family, like, hey, you know what copywriting is? They wouldn't know. A lot of the people in my family, I've been telling them for the last 10 years that I do copywriting, they still don't really know what it is. So it makes sense. But the reason you don't need to be worried about that is because in this day and age, almost every entrepreneur on the planet either knows what copywriting is or is going to find out pretty quickly into their run as an entrepreneur. It is a textbook example of something that is not quite mainstream, but is very well known within its niche. And when we're talking about niche, anyone engaged in online e-commerce is in that niche. Anyone who is trying to make money online either knows what copywriting is or is going to have a million people screaming copywriting at them within a very short amount of time. And this is why your goal is not to go out and convince anyone that copywriting is valuable. Most of them already know. Your goal is just to get your copywriting services in front of a large enough number of people that a percentage of them are going to be in the market to hire a copywriter now and interested in hiring you specifically. And the more people we get in front of, the more likely we are to get that small percentage of people who's going to give us money right now to write copy for them. So instead of worrying about persuading people, focus more on getting more pitches out there and getting your services in front of more people. The fourth thing that copywriters spend way too much time worrying about is their niche and trying to find a niche, especially early in their careers. The reason that so many writers are worried about choosing their niche is because everyone that they're following is hammering over and over that they need to pick a niche, that the best paid copywriters all have a highly specialized niche. And there's kind of implied this idea that they knew what this niche was from the start and they've always been focused on that niche. And the reason you don't need to be worried about picking a niche is because the vast majority of writers who operate in a highly specialized niche and are making a lot of money through their niche focus, that niche found them. They didn't start out from the very beginning hyper-focused on that niche 9 times out of 10. They started just looking for any gigs that they could get. Maybe they started pitching around that niche because it interested them. But one way or another, they just went out and started getting gigs. And over time, they started to see that, hey, I really enjoy doing this type of copywriting, or I really enjoy writing for this industry. And I'm seeing a lot of demand here. I'm finding that a lot of the clients I work with in this space are resulting in referrals. I'm getting a lot of demand around this one area. And so I'm going to sort of lean into that. I'm going to start to do more in that direction. And as they do more in that direction, they, develop more expertise there. They start to get really good at understanding the thought process there, the customers, the clients, the entrepreneurs, the value, the different types of business models, whatever it is. It's sort of a chicken and egg thing where by virtue of finding more demand there, you get more experience and expertise in that area, or vice versa. You start to sort of lean into a type of expertise or project that interests you, and it results in you discovering more demand there. It can work both ways. But my point is you're much more likely to find your niche simply by going out and landing clients and working on real projects in a wide variety of niches and industries. You're way more likely to have the niche find you than you are to be able to sit down right now and choose the perfect niche that's going to make you the most money over the next 30 years. So, all that to say, spend less time worrying about your niche and more time focused on just closing new projects and working with new people, working with new business models. You're going to find way more success by working with real people on real projects than you are sitting down and hyperventilating about what niche to choose. The fifth thing that writers are way too worried about is trying to figure out what the most profitable choice or direction is at any given moment. The reason that a lot of writers are worried about this is because we're starting to see an influx of writers who are coming into the space specifically because it's lucrative. Up until the pandemic, almost everyone I met who was coming into this field was doing so because they'd always had a passion for writing, and they were starting to discover that writing could be a lucrative skill set that could make them more money than their existing job or existing career. So it was kind of this dual motivation of people who, really enjoyed writing, had written a lot as a hobby over the course of their lives, but had never realized they could make a lot of money from it. And so now they were looking to find a career where they could merge something they're passionate about and something that could, help them not just pay the bills, but actually hit some of their financial goals. Ever since the pandemic and sort of this multi-year period where everyone spent the majority of their time online, the concept of copywriting as a lucrative career path has become a bit more mainstream. And as a result, a lot of the people coming into the field are doing so with purely a profit focus. They are here to make money and they don't really have anything else they care about in this space. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. I chose copywriting primarily for the money it could bring me. My goal was always to write, science fiction and fantasy, but I knew that would be an uphill battle to make money. Copywriting was my money play. And in a lot of ways, it still is today. It is not something that I'm particularly passionate about, but it makes good money and I don't hate it. I enjoy it for the most part. So if that's you, if you're watching this video and you're just here to make money, great. There's nothing wrong with that. But here's the caveat. There are very few people alive who can maintain the day-to-day motivation needed to start up a successful service business purely based on a desire to make more money. For most people, there has to be something more. And when there's not, I see people spin in this never-ending loop of constantly looking for the most lucrative thing. They're just looking for what's the thing that's going to make me the most money with the least effort. And there's always something new to consider. And as a result, they never actually put the consistent work in over time required to make money from anything. They're just constantly putting their toe in the water, trying different business models, trying different niches, trying different writing types. They put barely any effort into any of those. They're just constantly looking for really more of a get-rich-quick scheme. There are thousands of very legitimate ways to make millions of dollars online, but every single one of them is going to require consistent, sustained effort over probably multiple years. Yes, some people can really churn through something and get something successful up within a year, but even a year is a long time. It is not common for people to put a year of sustained effort into anything, particularly when there's no structure that immediately penalizes you for not doing the work. Like people put the work in for their family, their kids, at their full-time job. But in most cases, it's because there's an immediate consequence if they don't. Whereas when you're building your own business, there's no consequences if you don't do the work. And so what I would tell you is that you need to find a way to combine something that's profitable with something that you actually give a shit about. Because ultimately, if you really are into a certain space, a certain niche, a certain industry, a certain service type or business model, like if there's something in it that really grabs you, that really engages your passion, even if it is, at the 50 percentile of profitability, if it's something that's pretty middle of the road in terms of its potential profit, just by virtue of you being passionate about it and putting in more consistent effort than other people in the space who aren't as passionate about it will, you're going to make more money doing that than you would if you were to find the magical golden egg business model that has the highest possible return, but you don't really care about. So spend less time worrying about what the most lucrative niche is in the copywriting field and try to find something that you feel some passion for, something that makes you excited to write about or learn about on a day to day basis, and something that you think you will still be interested in a few years down the road. The sixth thing that many, particularly new writers, spend way too much time worrying about is learning copywriting. And when I say learning, I mostly mean reading about copywriting, reading copywriting training, reading copywriting books, um, going through the process of learning without doing. Now, the reason writers are worried about this is because this is how everything else works. We spent years and years of our life in school being taught that this is how you learn. You read and you get lectured. And to some extent, yeah, like you're going to learn a little bit about copywriting through reading. You're going to learn about it through watching lectures or videos like this, things where people are talking to you, telling you about, what you need to know about copywriting. There's nothing wrong with that. Obviously, I spend a lot of my time creating that very type of content, and it's valuable up to a point. The reason you don't need to be so worried about reading more books or watching more videos or reading more blog posts or going through more trainings is because you're going to learn the vast majority of everything you'll ever know about copywriting by actually doing copywriting. There is absolutely a place to begin your journey by reading, but it's a very short part of the journey. As soon as you understand what you're trying to do with a piece of copy, as soon as you understand the basics of writing copy, it's time to actually start writing. You are going to learn so much more, and the concepts are going to stick so much better, so much deeper when you are actually writing, when you are actually going through the process of thinking about putting together copy for a real client in a real scenario where you are trying to speak to real customers. So without further ado, spend less time worrying about learning more and spend more time focusing on actually writing, on actually practicing. And I absolutely need to define what I mean by practice, because the seventh thing that copywriters spend way too much time worrying about is practice. And the reason writers are worried about practicing is for the same reason we just talked about with learning. It's this idea that in order to write a real piece of copy, you need to write a bunch of fake pieces of copy. You need to go through, situation after situation where you are writing copy that has no stakes. You are writing something that's never going to be read. You're writing something that has no impact on your ability to make money. It just needs to be isolated. Just like learning, it's this desire to sit out of the game and make yourself ready to get into the game. And the reason you don't need to be worried about spending more time doing fake practice is because there are thousands of clients out there who need your help writing for their business, and they cannot afford to pay people who have a ton of experience. They only have $100, a few $100, maybe even $1,000 to do the copywriting for a whole website or multiple blogs or a whole welcome sequence. The budgets they have, they're never going to be able to afford established copywriters. They are a practice market. These are people who have practice budgets to pay you so that you can come practice writing for their business. And I promise you, if you come into these sorts of gigs and give it your best effort, you're actually not going to do a bad job. Remember, these entrepreneurs struggle to communicate through writing. If you can just come in and help them be clear with their thoughts, you're going to be delivering more value than the money that they're able to pay you. Do not sit out of the game. Spend less time worrying about whether you've had enough practice, whether you've learned enough, and spend more time focused on landing clients at any rate you can and learning by doing. The eighth thing that writers spend way too much time worried about is how they're going to interact with that first client, or even how they're going to interact with that next class of client, that client that can pay more, that's a bit more sophisticated. And the reason that so many writers are worried about this is because there's this idea that there's this very professional, very straightforward, consistent way businesses interact with freelancers. In so many other areas of our life, there's a very clear protocol in place. There's a way that people do things. And if you come in as an outsider, not knowing the rules, not knowing how things are done, it's immediately obvious. Everyone can recognize, oh, this person doesn't know what they're doing, or they don't belong, or they're a beginner. And so people assume that this is how freelancing works, that if you come in and you don't say the right thing or you don't follow the right steps, everyone's going to know you're a beginner or you're a fraud. There's this kind of imposter syndrome that comes up. But the reality is that freelancing is the Wild West. There are no fucking rules. And the first client that you ever work with, there's a very good chance you're going to be the first freelancer they've ever worked with. And they're going to be equally confused about how things are supposed to work. They're going to be looking to you to provide them with guidance on what they're supposed to do, what the protocols are. Because in many cases, they don't know and they don't assume they know. And granted, in my experience, entrepreneurship does tend to attract a lot of narcissists. And so you are going to find people who have a very specific way that they want things done. Um, Oftentimes that makes no sense and would never be in your best interest, but they just assume anything that's in their best interest is in everyone else's best interest as well, or that anything that they want or they demand that everyone else around them is just going to bow down and do exactly as they say. So you will encounter people like that, and they will make you start to feel like, oh, do they know something I don't know? But for the vast majority of clients, this interaction is as flexible to them as it is to you, even if you're coming in without a lot of experience. And in fact, one thing you'll notice that a lot of more established writers benefit from is because they've developed their own really clear, really explicit process. They make clients feel really great and really at ease by coming in and laying out exactly how things are going to work. They come into the client situation and say, here's how I do things. And that makes the client feel, oh, wow, awesome. Like they really know their stuff. I don't have to guess about anything. I don't have to figure things out. I can just go with what they tell me. And so if you could bring that same attitude into your client interactions, even if you don't know anything because this is your first time, just that confidence and that clear expectations is going to make the client respond really positively the vast majority of the time. Now, this is an area where it can be really helpful to listen to other copywriters or go through trainings about how to work with the client and just learn what their process is. Not because you need to follow it directly, but just because it'll help you kind of skip forward ahead in the process. A lot of the things that, people like myself develop over time um, are the result of us not doing certain things that come back to bite us or us doing certain things that don't work out. So we've sort of learned by trial and error, like, oh, if I don't ask for a questionnaire at the beginning of the project, I'm going to have to chase the client for answers to my questions, and they're often not going to get back to me. And so you just sort of learn like, oh, I need to get that question out there first and require that they send the answers to me before the turnaround clock begins. It's just simple things like that. You can struggle through it yourself, no problem. You'll be totally fine. Or you can, learn from other people, just like any aspect of this business. But all that to say, spend less time worrying about how you're going to interact with clients and any mistakes you might make, and just focus on landing clients in the first place. The ninth thing that writers are way too worried about is rejection. And writers are worried about this because everyone's worried about this. Nobody enjoys rejection. Nobody enjoys having people say no to them. Nobody enjoys reaching out to someone only to have them respond as if you're harassing them or annoying them with your presence. But the reason you don't need to be worried about it is because what's the worst that can happen? Every time you reach out, the upside is that you get money in your bank account and a gig that will level up your career. The downside is that someone says no, or that someone gets a little annoyed, or you have a fleeting temporary twinge of negative emotion based on the fact that someone said no to you. That's it. And what an amazing upside to downside ratio that is. How great is it that you can take a completely free action that results in you getting more money or experiencing a no? I'll take those odds all day. And I do. That's why I've been able to make multiple six figures per year for the last 10 years, because I don't mind when people say no. I don't mind when I get an angry email response. It doesn't feel great. It's never going to feel great. But it's a very minor downside for the upside of making more money, of having money deposited into my bank account that I can then spend on everything I want. So when you feel that fear of rejection, just remind yourself that there's virtually no downside here and a ton of upside. So spend less time worried about rejection and more time thinking about all the money you're going to make when the people who are going to say yes, say yes. And last but certainly not least, the thing you probably had in mind when you clicked on this video, maybe something that you've asked at some point over the last year or two. So many writers today are worried about artificial intelligence. And the reason writers are worried about artificial intelligence is because of the way artificial intelligence companies are marketing their AI products. Some of the most successful AI tools of the last few years have all been focused on writing and replacing copywriting. It's kind of funny that writing has become such a hot focus for AI when it's so distant from what most of us thought AI was going to be designed to take off our hands in the first place. And the reason you don't have to worry about this is because it's all marketing based around a lot of the concepts we've already covered in this video. Companies whose sole goal is to make profit have identified that people are paying trillions of dollars around the world to get help with writing. And that seems to be the most immediately accessible way that they can sell their AI technology is to help people with their writing. It's literally confirmation of all the things I've been telling you throughout this video. So many people around the world struggle to do writing. They struggle to communicate effectively. Even when they can communicate effectively, they often struggle with sitting down and actually getting through the process of writing. It can be a very time consuming process. And while all these tools have been created with the goal of taking these tasks, these writing tasks off people's plate, functionally, none of them are actually helping people to the level that they say they are. And I say this as someone who has invested in this space, been sponsored by companies in this space, had my hands behind the scenes in creating some of these tools. I have been very connected to this space over the last few years. And I can tell you right now that none of these tools are a threat to the field of copywriting. The only thing that these tools have fully replaced is the need to turn to real copywriters for very short form, simple types of copy that don't really generate actual profit. I'm talking about stuff like social media captions, tweets, email subject lines, things that are not unimportant, but have a very small correlation to the actual profit a business is driving. And even more importantly, were never the types of things that had to be outsourced to writers in the first place, or at least were never being outsourced at a substantial pay rate. 5 years ago, nobody was paying substantial amounts for Instagram captions. Nobody was really paying for tweets or short form pieces of copy like that. And even on email subject lines, like those can actually connect to real profit, but the name next to the email has a bigger influence in whether the email is open than the subject line itself. The things that people are paying copywriters substantial amounts of money to write for them are much longer than what AI is currently able to handle. Whether we're talking about a landing page, a full email, a blog post, the real value in these sorts of copywriting assets is very much about how the writing is structured, how the different ideas are connected together, how the argument is made over the course of the piece of copy. And AI today is very, very bad at putting ideas together. Even a tool like ChatGPT, which has left a lot of the other tools in the dust, it's not building a substantial sequential argument based on cohesive ideas. It can associate ideas. If you ask it about something, it can bring up some different ideas based on what it's seeing online. And it can make everything sound really, really, but functionally, it can't build arguments. It can't work with an entrepreneur to take everything they know about the business, pull it out of them, and turn it into a really effective value proposition. It can try, it can provide some brainstorming ideas along the way. It can even help you find different pieces that you're looking for, but it can't take you start to finish through the whole thing while delivering an effective output. And that is ultimately the job of the copywriter, is to come in, find the right ideas to build out this bigger, well-structured, well-targeted piece. And AI is nowhere close to doing that. So while I would absolutely encourage you to go start playing with some of these tools, seeing what they can do, looking even for ways to help them become a productivity multiplier in your own writing process, don't spend any time worrying about them because at the end of the day, they're not anywhere close to replacing your job or your skill set. I think they're going to help you make more money over the next few years than any potential business that they could take away. So that's it. 10 things that writers should spend less time worrying about. I hope you found that helpful. If you did, really appreciate if you give me a like and subscribe. Go ahead and leave a comment if you have any questions, and I will catch you guys in the next episode.